Welcome back to another episode of Sal and Pals Go to the Movies. This is another Throwback Thursday review, and I'm here with my friend Touly. Say hi, Touly.
Hey, guys.
And today we're going to be reviewing Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid from 1982. And just a fair warning, there's going to be spoilers up ahead, so you've been warned. Steve Martin plays a private eye uncovering a sinister plot in this film noir parody, with characters from real noir movies that appear in scenes from various films that are intercut into this movie. So let's start with the characters from this movie and actors. We have Rachel Ward, who plays Juliet, Steve Martin, who plays Rigby, the private eye, and we have Carl Reiner, who plays the butler and at the same time the sinister Nazi general at the end of the movie. I'm going to start with my pros. First of all, this movie was made in 1982. This is back in the day when Steve Martin was a popular comedian, and he still is. This movie has a lot of one-liners and a lot of jokes and throwbacks to old movies, specifically because this movie takes a bunch of 1930 black and white noir movies and intercuts them into this movie. I don't know if it was done on purpose, but you can actually notice it really easily nowadays. Maybe back in the days, it was a new concept for people and they were okay with it. But to me, I think it takes something away from the movie, but at the same time it gives it something allowing you to kind of understand that you're not watching a movie that is just a noir movie. You're watching comedy that's on purposely done this way. Maybe they did it on purpose, maybe they didn't, but that's probably one of the things that I'm going to have as a pro and con. Pro is it's easy to say that it's a comedy. Con, film didn't age well, but the jokes are still there. We have a bunch of one-liners, a bunch of funny scenes, a bunch of quotes that I can go through, like at the beginning where Rigby goes to meet Juliet and he gets greeted by the butler and he faints because I think he got shot, and he says, "Catch me," and then the butler says, "I'm a butler, not a catcher," and just lets him fall to the ground. I mean, to me that was like out of nowhere. It made me chuckle a bit. Also, when he's doing the voiceover as a noir film would do, as the detective's inner thoughts, we hear it. He's talking about that he's going to go to a hotel, meet somebody at Hotel Warrant. It used to be on 8th Street, but they received so many rubber checks that it bounced over to 5th Street. I mean, that itself is like, it's hilarious because it makes me feel like I'm watching a skit, but at the same time, it's something a detective would talk about in these old timely noir films. And just a little backstory, Carl Reiner and Steve Martin both wrote this script and Carl Reiner directed it. So it's kind of these two iconic comedians coming together and working together to produce this film. To me was something as nowadays is looking back and saying, wow, this is what they used to do back in the day. I mean, some of these jokes don't carry over to now. I mean, I'm pretty sure you couldn't get away with how he was adjusting the boobs of Juliet when she fainted when she came into his office. So I mean, some of these jokes are borderline like sexual harassment, but back in the day, people took it with a chuckle. It's nothing bad, it's nothing severely off script, but it's still there, plays on the jokes. Now for my cons, it's a bit of a slow paced movie in some scenes I could have done without. It seems like it's a really long Saturday Night Live skit to me. Sometimes it's like it goes out of its way for just one simple joke. It's kind of just too much for me. So those are my pros and cons for this movie. I'm gonna pass it on to Touly and see how he saw this film.
This was actually the first time I've ever seen this movie. Right from the start, I thought the movie was going to be more like a serious toned sort of film, especially with the way they started the film with a car plunging down a broken bridge, and it's left to the audience to assume then that whoever was in the car died. So then we get the scene shifted over to the detective's office, of course, being played by Steve Martin. And I thought, like I said, with this setup, I thought we were going to get this serious film. The detective's going to probably go and investigate what happened here. And it turns out the person who ended up dying in the car was the father of this daughter. The daughter was being played by Rachel Ward, of course, the character being named Juliet. And, I was like, okay, so we're going down this route. Pretty typical. But after Julia fainted and Rigby decided to, shall we say, massage a certain part of her body, it really threw me off guard. First of all, that was something I didn't expect a detective to do in that instance. I was thinking, okay, so is this supposed to be a comedy now or something? Right off the bat. So, okay, so let's just disregard the serious tone of this. And even when Julia woke up and Rigby came up with the excuse of, I'm just adjusting your breasts because you fainted and they shifted, all out of whack. I was like, okay, so I'll probably have to, kick back a little bit. Don't treat this movie that seriously. That was how I ended up enjoying most of the film. Like Sal said, it's a lot of one-liners, and Steve Martin was who Steve Martin was as an actor. I mean, the pacing, it was alright for the most part. The thing that I enjoyed the most was the integration of the films for the 1940s. I'd say most of them was handled alright. Some of them were rough in terms of like the transition from the dialogue that Rigby would have with these characters. You could definitely tell that the quality of the shots were different, that something was shot with older equipment versus current equipment at the time, and some of the lines just didn't quite flow naturally, like things that you would expect to occur when you meet up with somebody, like small talk to initiate a conversation. That didn't take place. It's like they tried their best to take specific lines from these old films to sort of blend in with the situation that Rigby was in. You know, like I said, sometimes it works, but sometimes it didn't. From that point of view, I have to downgrade the film a bit. I like the idea behind trying to incorporate these films into the movie. To me, that was a creative. I guess that's what I would put. That was creative. But some of them I could have done without, particularly when Rigby was trying to find a blonde to play as the spy in this upcoming scheme of theirs. I thought they went too far with that, in that he went to search for too many blondes. Maybe he should have just gone after one and then just roll with that instead of trying to come up with reason as to why he didn't choose this one over the next one, because I thought that was just time being wasted on screen. So had he just gone after one particular blonde and sort of developed that relationship somehow, which they were able to achieve in the final person that he came to meet. So had they just gone straight to that, I would have been okay with that. But I thought like they spent a little too much time on that. And then to Sal's point too, where they went a little too far to just get to a particular joke, I could have done without as well, particularly when Rigby dressed up as the blonde and as the mother. Maybe this was something that was considered hilarious back in the 1980s, and so they decided to roll with this, but for me, I could have done without it. In terms of plotline, I would say the one fatal flaw that I thought they should have done a better job was they kept on hinting on this relationship between Juliet and Rigby, and of course Rigby didn't want to commit to this relationship because he was a detective. It was a danger of life for him. He knew that this was a job where he couldn't get involved with somebody because he would put them to, dangerous positions, and so he tried his best to push Juliet away. There was the scene where Juliet was questioning why Rigby was doing this, why he was investigating on her behalf, and of course Rigby was trying to be protective of his situation too by saying that, he was just doing it for the money, and of course this offended Juliet, so she slapped him and took off. And so I thought that was the moment where the two characters were at like a low, and they needed to come to some sort of agreement again through like some action or through some realization so that they could get over this hump and then get to the bottom of the investigation. Something happened, of course, and then they ended up making up in a way. For me, I thought like when they had made up, that was it. There weren't going to be any more struggles or confusion between the two characters. They were on the same page. But later, when Juliet was going to go out, I believe, in the rain to go get medicine from the store or something for Rigby because he just got drugged again and like his knees were like all bruised up. Rigby thought that Juliet was already out. He received a phone call from somebody that he knew from the past, and of course Rigby was just playing around with this person on the other line now. The conversation made it seem like he was still into her, and of course Juliet picked up the phone and overheard this. And then this set off another sequence where Juliet didn't trust Rigby and that she shouldn't have a relationship with him despite them having come to, at that point, their feelings. That was already confirmed, but that phone call alone set them back once again. And so that really didn't sit well with me because it was like pick one or the other. They should not have like took one step forward and then two steps back. Like to me, from like a story plot development, that I thought they could have done better at. I mean, beyond that, really, like I said, I was looking at this film more from like a comedic point of view, something that they were making fun of, like the film noir scene, maybe like a parody of some sort. All in all, considering that this film did come out in the 1980s, I need to consider that in weighing how I felt about this film overall, and the fact that they did use films from the 1940s as part of the storytelling element. I have to take that into account as well, in terms of like the creativity they were trying to go for. Like for me personally, it wouldn't stand, or like you said too, Sal, it wouldn't be a film that aged well if we were to compare it to today's time. There's been a lot of films out there that have demonstrated that they are able to take films in the past and integrate it to modern technology and modern storytelling. if this was a film that was made today and it had that sort of quality, it would not sit well. But like I said, I have to consider that it was made in the 1980s and technology was probably more limited back then. So because of that, I can't be too hard on it in that retrospect. But all in all, I would say I enjoyed it. It did throw me off from the beginning, but once I realized the sort of tone, the sort of theme they were going for, then, I just watched it for what it was.
Great. That's basically almost the same point of view that I shared with you. Just going back to the jokes, I mean, some of the jokes would not be able to play nowadays. To add to your comment about the film equipment, some lines would not work. Not because it's not funny, just because I wouldn't think it'd be able to get a low rating. It'd probably be a rated R movie or something, just because of the dialogue or some of the things the dialogues will hint at it. For example, this one line is Juliet saying, "What does fuck mean?" Rigby says, "It's a slang word. It's when a man and a woman are in love," and the man puts, and Juliet replies by saying, no, it's written here, FOC, referencing to a piece of paper they discovered with a list of names. Stuff like that. I mean, back in the day, it was a joke. They were less strict about these kind of jokes, but now in the community, the PC community that we live in, maybe films like this wouldn't be able to get decent rating in the films. But just the line itself, I mean, to me, it's a funny line. I mean, it's not offensive or anything, but I can see people getting upset about it, since the rating of this movie was not an R rating or something. And then other scenes in the movie, they play on tributes for either actors or scenes. For example, there's the scene almost at the end when Rigby is by the bar in the island of Carlotta. Charles Launton, the actor who's in this old film, integrated into this film, he comes up to him and they start talking about, who you could be. You can be the guy who takes $10,000 to live the island. Charles replies by, who I could be. And Rigby replies by saying, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. That's a reference to the 1939 movie, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, where Charles, the actor, actually plays the Hunchback. So that is a little Easter egg that people would not necessarily know if they'd never watched that film. The same way when he's looking for the blonde and he goes up and picks up Lana Turner, the actress, and they get in the car and he says, "I'm sorry for leaving you at the counter of Schwab's." That's a reference to the trivia that she was discovered as an actress at the counter of Schwab's drugstore. And he kind of puts it in the movie kind of as a little chuckle, and for people who are fans of the old films and they're like, "Oh, I know that actress and I know where she was discovered," or "I know that guy, he's from this other film." So for me, I think it's hilarious, but I can see it as other people who just watching the movie and not know about histories of the old movies. They're just they don't see it, but at the same time it kind of plays into the movie. It's not needed, but at the same time people would appreciate it. But to me, as a person who sees it both ways, I kind of think those scenes were not needed. And like Touly said, for him searching for the blonde, there were too many blondes in the scene for just the outcome that he decided to become the blonde. There are some scenes that actually, to me, are hilarious and they should be in there. Just for example, the Java scene where he tells the guy, "Hey, you need a cup of my Java." He goes into the kitchen and starts getting a pot and starts pouring coffee grains into it. He pours the whole bag into it, but he does it in a comedic sense that is just the right amount of time that it takes for him to start pouring the bag slowly, shaking it little by little. Eventually, he ends up pouring the whole bag into it. To me, that scene works perfectly then, and it still works now. It's a funny scene that it should stay in the film. And now, I guess, with that, I'm going to ask Touly for his final grade, but also I'm going to ask him to either give us a scene, a quote, or a one line that is his favorite from the movie.
So I already mentioned the scene that transpired between Rigby and Julia at the beginning that introduced both of their characters. Again, the way Rigby reacted towards Julia when she was passed out really threw me for a curve. But at the same time, it did set up for a couple of the lines later down the road when Julia got knocked out and Rigby pretty much came out from the trash can, whatever that he was being held captive in, by saying, "Oh, those dirty bastards, beating up a woman, they even knocked your breasts out of whack as well." I mean, I guess it was supposed to play tribute to what happened earlier in the movie so that there's some sort of chemistry, but it's a play on the chemistry, I suppose. And even towards the end where the final scene where the role was swapped around between Rigby and Julia, where Juliet was apparently pulling on Rigby's, as she would say, his willy. And Rigby was like, well, I hadn't had my willy adjusted like that in a long time, especially without having to beg. Yeah, I get it. It's just this chemistry that they kept on coming back to. But a lot of this, just the narrating that you would get from Rigby, it's like very influential, I would say, in terms of trying to get to know what's in the mind of these characters so that you don't really have to guess, even though sometimes they are very obvious already with what's going through their head and stuff. But sometimes with films like this, especially when it's a comedy, you could throw in a little twist in there and try to get some laughs. Those I'm fine with. It's more of like what we've been saying throughout this podcast, where sometimes they went too far just to get to a certain point or a certain joke to be realized that I thought they could have done a better job at taming it down and stuff. Also, using this sort of mechanism allows them to also break the fourth wall. Even though it wasn't a narration being done by Rigby at the end, it was more like the on-screen conversation he was having with the Nazi general, where they were each trying to explain what was going to happen to America by the exploitation of the rotten cheese or whatever. The Nazi general wanted to explain that he wanted the responsibility to explain how he was going to achieve this goal of his, whereas Rigby's character as the detective, he wanted the responsibility to explain this because he was the hero and, he was the detective, and he wanted to explain how he came to solve this mystery as well. So it was funny that they went back and forth and eventually came to utter the same lines at the end. So I like it when movies break the fourth wall, but of course they have to do it in the right manner. And I thought, for the sort of theme that the movie was going toward, for it to have come to that realization, it was great. I mean, I could live with that. In terms of the grade of the film, I would say I would give it a 6.5 out of 10. I mean, again, I already mentioned a lot of the things that I didn't like about the film, but I did mention stuff that I did like as well. And overall, I would say I enjoyed it more than the things that I didn't like about it.
Okay, well, I'm going to share one of my favorite lines in the scene. It's a funny line because it's a tribute to an older movie. This is Juliet inside Rigby's office, and she says, "If you need me, just call. You know how to dial, don't you? Just put your finger in the hole and make tiny circles." This is a funny line, not just because it's an innuendo, but at the same time, it plays tribute to an older film that a lot of people may not know where it's from, but they know the quote, and the movie is To Have and Have Not. And the line is delivered by the late Lauren Bacall, and the line goes like this: "You know how to whistle, don't you, Steve? Just put your lips together and blow." It's one of my favorite quotes from a movie, but at the same time, it plays so well into this movie because it makes you remind you that this is a parody, and at the same time, it's not just, making fun of old movies, but at the same time, telling us that these movies at their time were really great, and some of them still are. My grade for this movie falls between a 6.5 to 7 out of 10. I can still watch this movie every few years and get a chuckle out of it. But like we said, there is some flaws with it that it didn't age well. Other than that, this movie is a decent movie. So with that, I guess we reached the end of this review for Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid. Please join us next time when we review The Night of the Living Dead. Social media is down in the description, and hit us up if you have any questions. And remember, keep watching movies.